This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Not so bad yourself.
Fantastic. Here at the Gartner IAM Summit 2025 in Grapevine, Texas.
Yeah, so I refrained from mentioning the cowboy hat. I did that already a couple times, but here I am mentioning it again.
Yeah, well, hey, when in Texas, do as the Texans do.
Yeah. So we've got a special one today. We are doing a sponsored episode with our friends over at Redblock. So we're going to get right into a second, but you want to learn about Redblock, it's redblock.ai/IDAC. We'll have links in our show notes for people to check out. But let me go ahead and introduce their CEO, Indus Khaitan. Welcome to the show.
Well, a fantastic day at Grapevine, Texas. Such a beautiful hotel. I wish my children and my wife was here.
There are a lot of children and wives here. I think people are taking advantage of sort of like there's a Christmas kind of festive type holiday thing going on here. There's a Build-A-Bear workshop. So other than identity and access management, there are things for people to do.
Kind of odd place to have a conference in the season.
Yeah, I think we'll probably be in Vegas next year, which seems a little more normal for like a conference, but
Vegas is not normal, but for a conference.
Yeah. So thanks for sponsoring this episode. We're going to learn about Redblock today. One of the things that we always like to find out is for our first-time guests, and it's the first time being with us, is a little bit about sort of their identity journey. How did they got into the world of identity, or maybe security, or maybe both? So let's start there. How did you get into the space of IAM or digital identity?
Well, I'm a programmer. I'm a CS grad and been dabbling with writing code. And most recently, I did a startup in mobile security. That was like when iPhone 1 came out. And very interestingly, iPhone 1 would not authenticate against Active Directory. Active Directory, yes. And we built a business enabling organization and employees to access their internal resources. Cloud was not common back then, so their SharePoint and their files on network shares. That's when I came to know, there's a thing called identity. And then that startup got acquired by Oracle, and amongst other things, I was a PM for one of the Oracle's identity product for a period of 6 months. So I got my exposure in identity, and lo and behold, I'm doing an identity startup.
So you're kind of an identity lifer. Now you're at Redblock, or you started Redblock. I just have to know, how did you come up with the name?
Well, the name has multiple layers. So November-ish of 2023, when I got this idea that, hey, AI in its post-LLM world is going to be multimodal. So ChatGPT 3.5 comes out, and it makes it very easy to recognize world objects, not just a picture of a cat, which the AI reasons as cat, or a dog, AI reasons as dog, but more context, such as if you show AI the picture of a lion, it say, oh yeah, that's a cat family, without actually decoding it's a picture of cat. And then we thought, hey, how about we feed some screenshots of postures for web apps? And lo and behold, it just detects beautifully that, on your Twitter screen, you have these access profiles that you should not have. And then we started experimenting, and we thought, hey, why don't we build a workflow that converts human actions into AI-driven flows? And then there was a very popular workflow tool, let's not name them, and they had a blue box for all the flows going into a ticket. So, something happens, and then, of course, it goes to an ITSM where a human picks up. And when they said, hey, why don't we change this to a red color and the ticket goes to an AI-driven human flow? That's one of the layers. There are multiple, red teaming as an example, but that's one of them.
Yeah, that's neat. So what is the underserved area, or what is the market problem in identity today that you feel is underserved?
I'm going to give you two arcs on this. The arc one, and this is like a market answer, like a top level answer. For every dollar in cybersecurity, this, $5 spent on services, operational staffing, human labor, and just getting things done like manually. So if you look at the TAM of, or the revenues of companies collectively in 2024, 220 billion-ish last year, cybersecurity across the board, all products sold. Guess what the numbers are for services and people enabling those products is close to $1 trillion.
Wow.
And hate to say this, but there is a laundry list of services companies and vendors and people that serve this market. If you tease identity, a smaller section, 30, 40 billion, close to $200 billion spent on services. We thought, hey, how can we turn this into a category where services are now enabled using AI-driven software? So that's the market we are going after. It's a bigger arc on the top. But if you look tactically from a buyer's perspective, they have a lot of work that gets stopped by a ServiceNow ticket or a Jira ticket. So anything that you want to do in IT automation or identity, at the end of the day, it's a fulfillment job, which you and I will get, hey, John, can you do this? Hey, Jacob, can you fulfill this? We are essentially routing that ticket to AI and let AI fulfill that task. Instead of a ticket being fulfilled by a human, AI fulfills that ticket.
So even with all the new spaces or disciplines within IAM that are starting to kind of sprout up, I still think the traditional approach is IGA, access management, privilege access management. I think, though, even with good tools, it's lacking. What do you think?
It is lacking because if you look at the scaffold, ultimately it's about, do you have enough coverage? Do you have enough visibility into your applications, your identities? If you do not, doesn't matter as IAM, IGA, PAM, and now NHI and in future agents, your tasks will not be done, your visibility will not be there. So it doesn't matter whether you move from one acronym to the other. If you do not know how many apps you have, what identities are inside those applications, and what entitlements are there, the gap is still there in the market. So you're spending all of this money to solve 10, 15, 20% of the problem, where your back door, your front door is closed, but your back door, your side door, your garage door, your trap door for rodents, still freely accessible. And that's where we are going after.
I think you just touched on it a little bit, but I want to talk about what is the urgency that, from a business perspective, what is the urgency to go after this versus make investments in other areas of identity?
So if you look at the last 10 years of ransomware attacks or account takeovers, so starting from Target 10 years ago to Salesforce customer instance breach of last year, there's so much in news. Each of these companies had all the certifications, all the compliance, all the tools, all the money, the best of the people. They still got breached. So it basically reflects on us as a community that isn't there something that is not being served? And the gap there is that the urgency that's brewing. If you give it another thought, adversaries are no longer breaching firewalls. They're no longer dropping malware on your laptop. They're simply logging in. So if credentials are the main primary vector, do you have aggregated data of all the identities and the credentials that are probably in the wild, all the accounts that are in your systems? So I think the urgency is, what are the apps that are not covered? What are the apps that are not governed? And I hate to say this, but InfoSec community has a euphemism for this called last mile, long tail, as if they don't matter.
Right.
But they do matter, because if your sensitive data is in one of those apps and that gets breached, it's a vector to take over your infrastructure.
So you talk about this gap, right? You've got these disconnected apps, and you're totally right. It's like, hey, let's solve for 80% of the problem, and what do you do with that last 20%? So you talk about governance. There's a lot of governance tools out there already, right? We've got PAM, we've got IGA. If I'm sitting here with my famous jaded CISO hat, it's like, okay, well, why do I need another tool? Like, why isn't PAM and IGA good enough? Is it just the way they're approaching it, or is this like a new space? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a space that already existed. So if I dovetail on my previous thought, that irrespective of all the tools, all the technologies, all the certification, all the compliance, breaches have still happened, and there's definitely a gap in the market that we're not serving. We're trying to solve the same problem. We're trying to do visibility on the same things that are being visible. We're trying to build a better workflow for the things that we see, but we're not going after the areas that are unseen to us. I'll give you an example. So Okta, as a identity governance and access vendor, so they have this product called Okta Integration Network. 8,100-ish apps are publicly listed there. That means vendors that have come in and put their apps in there. If I tell you less than 5% of those apps have any automation of onboarding, offboarding, changes, and provisioning, the rest of the 95% are manual. It's wild, wild west. So John joins your org. He gets access to everything that he wants. When he leaves, his access still lingers. God forbid, if those accounts are on Salesforce, on Snowflake, and a credential theft and a spray and pray attack compromises that, nobody's paying attention. So it's a newer urgency that's brewing. Go after the areas that have not been seen. It's like my closet, my wife doesn't want me to open because, hey, you don't open it because we don't know what's inside. You gotta goddamn open it.
So you mentioned another area that is, pretty common, right? You talk about authentication and IDPs kind of getting in that space of controlling access to resources. Where does RedBlock fit into sort of like this triangle of opportunity / sadness that exists between authentication, IGA, and PAM? Is RedBlock somewhere in those areas? Is it something different? Is it a blend? Like, help me understand kind of the positioning.
So if you visualize this as a three-legged stool, so leg one is your IAM, IGA, PAM, non-human identity, everything else, which is your visibility plane, which is your control plane, which is the workflow engine, which is a policy engine. And then the second leg is hundreds of micro legs, which are the applications. So you have your Salesforce, your Zoom, and your Slack, and then 5,500 internal applications built by your team. So we come in between these two legs and enable flow of data to give you visibility into those 1,500. And of course, a control plane so that you don't have to file another ticket to take over access for the people who have left or do governance on those apps or change entitlements. So we kind of sit in the middle between the applications and the governance and identity vendors. If I give you a better analogy, think of RedBlock as your DoorDash carrier. We will take the order from you as a consumer, which is your identity tool, and then go pick up that order from the restaurant, which is your apps, and then without even looking into it and deliver this. And then, of course, the transaction happens. So kind of come in the middle.
So you got me at the DoorDash because I'm a big fan. But when you said DoorDash, I started thinking, okay, well, this sounds a little bit like orchestration. Is you're picking up something from one spot and then figuring out what needs to happen with it and then dropping it somewhere else. Is that fair?
Think of this as a last mile execution. Your DoorDash app is the orchestrator. It figures out, go pick up from restaurant 1, then go pick up from restaurant 2, combine those two orders, deliver it to me. So the orchestration engine is your DoorDash app. The guy who's fulfilling is the person, the carrier. So we are that carrier. We're picking things up from these individual applications. Hey, give me all the identities, give me all the entitlements and the roles and API keys and credentials and deliver it to me. Boom, package it, give it to you, and then say, hey, go do more tasks and then go do that.
So now I'm thinking logistics.
Logistics is a great word. So yeah, tell me where to go, tell me what to do, we'll do this for you, you don't worry about it. You still give me that trigger. So we don't have intelligence of our own. I hate to say this, my team doesn't like it, but we are taking triggers from SailPoint, we're taking tickets from ServiceNow, and then doing the job which is supposed to be done.
Yeah. Okay, so let me keep my jaded CISO hat on. And this is probably a question a lot of people want to know. It's like, okay, so what makes RedBlock special? Like, what do you think it is that makes your product, your service, different from others that are in the marketplace?
So this problem existed for a long time. So if you look at the last mile execution, the automation, RPA vendors tried solving this. If you look at finance as a larger category, you need to process invoices. So manually, it's impossible to aggregate. So you put an RPA bot there, script it, and grab the data. That color has been kind of implemented in identity to a certain degree for user access review. So you need to aggregate spreadsheets or user data. But RPA is scripted. It breaks when the UI changes, when the list of values simply changes, it breaks. It's almost like writing a piece of code that has supposed to be executed. We are more, I haven't used the word AI yet, so we are agentic. So think of us as, the way we work behind the scenes is we use computer vision. So the AI looks at the screen visually, just like you and me, on the app and say, okay, what do you want me to do? Okay, here's the credential, login. Okay, what's next? Grab the list of users, package as a JSON, and give it to me. So the AI is looking at the screen and then taking decisions and then extracting the information or taking action and delivering it to you. And that differentiates us. So more modern, if you want to call it, there's no word around it. It's kind of being coined, agentic process automation. But yeah, that's where it is.
Okay, so you've opened up the box of AI. And I've been thinking about, when you kind of first talked about this, okay, how do I formulate this question? I'm going to put it rather bluntly. How do I trust the AI to do the right thing? Because now we're talking about security.
Right.
And so it needs to be auditable, it needs to be traceable, you need to be able to explain it, right? I think there's a lot of people out there who are interested in sort of like, oh yeah, it sounds cool, but how do I know it's making the right decisions?
Great question. So when we started this, the demo version of the product that we have built now took us like a week, but it took us a year to put those guardrails around it. Because when you're doing something with identity security, you cannot have it go wrong. It cannot delete a wrong John at example.com. It has to be JOHN, not JON, if that's the name, example.com. So we built a lot of algorithmic decision making. We built guardrails around it in terms of how AI navigates. I'm going to tell you this. In our case, the AI does not make decisions. The AI is doing analysis. And this is when you dig deeper into the industry that we are going after, vendors or competition will tell us, oh yeah, you give the trigger, the task to the AI, and the AI will figure itself out and decide and take a decision. In our case, the algorithms, the guardrails, the workflow that have inside, they make decision. AI is the reasoning engine. It's helping navigate. It's helping figure out what needs to be decided upon without AI deciding it. There's a lot more work done technically. We have filed close to a dozen patents on what we have built. So it's not like Indus's skunk work in the garage and coming out and party, but there's a lot of work that has been done.
I think the whole business case resonates with me, where you stand up a lot of these tools and it's like, but you have to get full value, you have to integrate hundreds of applications in an enterprise scenario. So that's where I think Redblock fits in. Maybe you can confirm that for me. But I'm also thinking from a practitioner standpoint, like, how do I get this thing rolled out? You talked about services in the beginning. So for a typical customer, what does it look like to get started and to actually start getting that value where it's like, okay, now I've got 5-10 applications integrated to, I'm leveraging Redblock and I'm integrated to hundreds of applications.
And that's the challenge for traditionally, we have customers that just bought a very popular IGA product, and they are grappling with this thought. They have 500 applications to be onboarded, and they got a quote from a services vendor. It's a 4-year journey. So you essentially are waiting for 4 years to discover every piece of identity in your enterprise. You know what's the analogy there? You're a company of 10,000 employees, and you do not know the 999,000 of them because it takes time to go interview and corral. So we come in and we onboard these apps, an app a day. The process is very straightforward. So let's say you have an app, let's call John's ERP engine app, right? What are the identity operations? Add user, remove user, change user, and aggregate users. So for each of these identity ops, you just record a 25-second video of how you and I as humans would interact with the app. So you log in, you go click on that add user button in an admin corner of the screen, and that screen recording on any desktop, it gets uploaded onto our studio, and the AI crunches it for an hour, And it builds a turn-by-turn navigation of what needs to be done, how it would be done when a trigger from the governance tool or an access tool comes in real time. And then it'll perform that action, almost like an API call going to the AI. It performs the action, confirms it, and closes a loop with the governance vendor, or with the governance application, or with the PAM, saying, hey, rotate credentials on hundreds of CCTV cameras in the supply chain. It'll take a trigger from the PAM, do exactly I had described. Go log into each one of these CCTV cameras, admin console, rotate the credentials, push it back to the PAM's vault.
Super cool. I think if I was listening to this podcast right now, I'd rewind about 2 minutes and have to listen to that again. I think that seeing some kind of demo of what you just talked about, where you basically create recordings of this administrative process, AI processes through that, and then learns how to do it. It's like, that's the dream, right? It's like AI robots can take YouTube videos and learn from them. I think it's fantastic. Super cool. So I want to see a demo. Hopefully you have that posted on the redblock.ai/IDAC.
We'll have the demo posted. And the kicker here is, which I didn't mention so far, all of this infrastructure runs not in our cloud, but in our customer's cloud. So we serve banking customers, we serve regulated industries. So we package the AI model, the platform, as a virtual appliance and hand it off as a binary, and it runs air-gapped on their own cloud or on-prem. So it doesn't push data to a commercial model, OpenAI or Gemini or anybody else. It's our model that is talking natively on-prem or in their own cloud.
Does that go for the training as well? So
Goes for the training as well.
okay, so let me make sure I understand this. For me to set up a connection, let's call it, you're watching my mouse movements, you're recording the screen, I say, okay, this is the button I press to do this thing, and then the system learns what that looks like. And what happens if screens change, UI changes? Do I have to retrain like that action again? Like how does, what happens if it doesn't click the right button or it makes a mistake? Like, I feel like I'm the negative one for this.
No,
but like these are questions I think Legitim's like, okay, well, now I'm looking at a screen that might potentially have sensitive information, a user ID, a secret, something. It's going into like this screen recording. Like, how do I safeguard to make sure that I'm comfortable as a CISO or any other risk person to say, yeah, I trust this thing? It goes back to the trust question I asked earlier about AI.
So I'll break this down in two parts. Part one, all of this training happens in your environment. So the video that you just recorded for training the AI sits within your block storage, gets destroyed after the AI learns it. It's not needed. That's once. None of this travels to Redblock's infrastructure or outside of your prem. Second, I'll give you an analogy. So if you drive a Tesla or any FSD, you're not training on a daily basis. It has the model that understands, okay, what's a pedestrian, what's a cone, what's a moving object. And it's navigating, deviating, maintaining the curvature of the road as it would need be. And same thing for the web app. Your color of the button could change from blue to gray. The placement could change from left to right. It doesn't require retraining. Because when the AI ingests the recording, the training video for the first time, when it builds a turn-by-turn directions, it's not hard-coded coordinates, nor hard-coded text of the button. Training itself based on the intent of the screen. What's the intent of the screen? Is to log in. Do I have the credentials? Username, password, second factor, multi-factor. What's the intent? Go to the next screen. Go to an admin section. So it's reasoning, just like you and I. Let's say you and I are on a shopping site. We don't know where the checkout button is. We start with the URL. Okay, add. Let's find the checkout button. Okay, not on this page. Go to the next page. AI is reasoning very similarly how you and I. So we've trained it just like the human behavior on a page.
See, Jeff, I think you asked that question, right? Because you're interested. It's like,
yeah,
wow, this is really cool. We need more. We need to dig more. I'm thinking that, so this works in coordination with your existing identity infrastructure, your IGA, your NHI solution, your PAM, and I think you talked about that a little bit. And I guess from what you said, the way I'm envisioning this is like you say, all right, I'm going to give Jeff XYZ access. Maybe in a manual environment, you'd go out and issue an ITSM ticket, and a human being would go out and do that. But instead, Redblock's going to pick up that quote unquote ticket, and it's going to do that based on this training. There's still got to be some kind of integration, right?
Correct.
Some integration work with those IAM systems. So talk to us a little bit about that.
So we are a SailPoint partner, we're a Savient partner, we work with Okta, work with Entra, CyberArk, and others. And when we started, we didn't want to replace the CISO's chessboard. We want to come in and be a little bit more strategic around what pieces to move. So we integrate with, let's take SailPoint as an example. We integrate the SailPoint as if it's a native app connected inside the SailPoint universe. So that if you're an admin, you're a user of SailPoint, your business is on a daily basis as usual. It would almost feel like that app, John's ERP engine, is just magically connected using this API inside SailPoint. So we work very closely. So on the upstream side, between SailPoint and Redblock is a very tight coupling. Basically conform to their connector framework and add an app as a new disconnected app comes on board. So to your question, when you say a request for fulfillment of, let's say, removing a user, SailPoint will happily send a trigger using an API call to us saying, hey, for this app, perform this action, which is remove a user, for this attribute, which is the email address, which is a unique identifier. Redblock's engine is going to take it and then perform the necessary AI automation behind the scenes to remove the user. So it's just like a connected universe on the upstream side, but by virtue of the AI being brought in together.
I can sit here and ask you, we went through the why. I could just ask questions about the how all day because I am interested. I do need to understand again, so maybe we put this in as simple explanation as possible. So how is it that, traditional approach takes 4 years to get 500 apps integrated, but Redblock can do it in how long?
So traditional approaches, the numbers. So let's say you have a brand new SailPoint instance, you're a bank, you have 400 apps to go through. SailPoint is going to give, I'm just using SailPoint as a proxy to the larger IAM universe. So governance vendors will have 150 odd apps that have connectors out of the box, which means if you're lucky, the Venn diagram of what connectors are available out of the box versus your 500, you probably have a match of 10, 15, 20. Boom, 10, 15, 20 done, you have 400 to go. So then you put an RFP out, contact a services vendor to write connectors for those 400 apps. Averages $10,000 to $20,000 per app over a period of 4 to 6 weeks, lucky like a week. Now you're looking at millions of dollars, looking at a 2 to 4 year timeline to bring those on board. For us, we're not writing code to connect these applications. There's no JDBC, there's no Java. It's all driven by AI. So you record a video, upload it, and the time that is being spent is for an analyst to confirm that the AI is behaving exactly it's supposed to behave. And within a day or two, you're giving it a test data, hey, remove these 3 sample accounts, and the AI takes it, removes those 3 sample accounts, you're satisfied, boom, you take that unique identifier of that particular app, and then you add it in your governance application. So, SailPoint, Savient, CyberArk, or what have you. And then they are ready to take the trigger. So, when your certification campaign is ready to run, the aggregation process begins. A signal comes to Redblock saying, hey, I need the list of 10,000 users with the entitlements. Boom. Just an internal API call between Redblock and the governance. And the response gets sent. Similarly for removal of a user. So the time is very shortened compared to the years that it would take. I'll give you a very specific example. A customer that we are onboarding, they'll bring 150 apps next year. They had a 3-year quote for close to $1.5 million.
So, 2-part question. Let's talk about that model. Is it something like you go and help them kind of get kick-started, and then it's DIY. And then also, like, for a mature client who's actually, well into their program, how are they measuring the value, measuring their success?
So it's DIYs. The first part is that we kind of help with the first 15, 20, 10 and do a knowledge transfer and then shadow them for a period of time. So we just gave a statement of work to another bank, and that's what we're doing. Like 25 apps, we will do it for them and then shadow them for another 25, and then they take over from them there. The biggest ROI is, at least the tangible ROI, is time saved. An IT ticket is 40 minutes to 2 days. You know the numbers on IT ticket, like mindless. AI is going to fulfill this in less than 3 minutes. So you could shrink the time to 70 to 80% on an aggregate basis, but in many cases, on edge cases, like by 99%. So time saved equates to money. Second, if you are a very large bank, you have, let's say, 90 apps under SOX or under compliance, you have to perform the aggregation. You're moving data around, you have CSVs, and then if there's a human error in one of the aggregated data, which is a CSV file, you have 3 strikes before you get penalized. So millions of dollars in penalties potentially are saved. And I'm not even using reduction of threat vectors and attack vectors because a rogue account, an orphan account, was disabled by AI. And let's be honest, the reason the ransomware or the adversaries are active, not because we don't have tools, but because we do not have time. We do not have time to go look into each and every corner and say, hey, have I covered all the identities? Have I covered everything? Now the AI is just scanning and going and fixing this.
So I'm going to ask maybe a stupid question.
Yes.
Because I'm really curious about how this works. How does it do the work? It's not an API.
It's not an API.
So is it spinning up some sort of like virtualized environment to like replicate a human doing the work?
It basically spawns a headless browser.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So let's take the governance example. You have request for a user removal from access tool. Let's take SailPoint as a governance tool. The API call from SailPoint travels to redblock. Normal API, nothing fancy. The moment it comes, we spawn. Of course, there's a lot of work done behind the scenes in terms of agent planning and all of that. I'm kind of glossing over. But the crux is a headless browser gets spawned. And this headless browser gets spawned based on the training that we talked about earlier, based on the URL. Say, johnserpengine.com gets launched. A set of credentials are fetched, service accounts from a PAM, and then the AI is essentially performing the task just like you and I would do, except there's no visual monitor, there's no display adapter, it's all being done in the memory. Somewhere in a data center, there's nothing running locally on your laptop, there's nothing running adjoining the application where it is going, it's all running remote in a headless environment, and then of course, the underlying models are helping decide what needs to be done based on the trigger that comes in.
Okay, and Jim, you hit it right in the head. It's like, I feel like I can ask how questions
Yes,
all day
do.
long. My last, and this probably isn't a how question, but what are the limitations of this? Because you mentioned a headless browser. I think, okay, SaaS, yeah, makes sense. What about an on-prem application, like an SAP or some other thing that is, I would say not a modern application, something like that?
As long as that legacy app, so we have done some experiments, we have not released the product yet. If your mainframe can be proxied over a web browser, the AI can still read and extract information. It does not do well when you're change stuff, add attributes. So our current limitation is, and this is a roadmap we haven't thought through yet completely, can we solve for thick clients when you have a desktop application running in your local laptop or a server environment? Right now, our limitation is anything that is web navigable. If you and I as humans can navigate and solve the problem in a browser, bingo, AI will do it.
Okay, and I appreciate understanding that because I think a lot of people say, yes, of course we can do it, and then we'll figure it out later. But I think of just kind of brainstorming, it's like, okay, well, why not just spin up like a little virtual machine, of a Windows or a Mac or in Linux and run that thick client in the same way where it would be kind of like a browser type thing. So I'm not an engineer. I'm just thinking, rudimentary, but it feels like it's the art of the possible at that stage.
I think it's very early. So if you look at, I'm going to use the self-driving as an analogy. So 10 years ago, Elon announced autopilot, of course, marketing jargon, but it did those three things very well. Put the car on the autopilot, it will maintain the curvature of the lane, it'll drive, it'll do adaptive cruise control. Second, it'll do a very fantastic lane change. You tap it up and veer to the next one and then done. Third thing, it will park very well, like parallel parking, bingo, like 10 years ago, unimaginable. But 10 years from now, it is almost like I don't drive anymore 99% of the time unless there's an intervention, because that's how it has become. I think we are at the early stage of AI-driven automation. This is the first year. This is the first year of the autopilot. Unfortunately, the hype is so much you can actually call it almost autopilot. I think we'll get there to the nirvana stage in the next 5-7 years.
So I appreciate the pun of AI-driven and using the full self-driving analogies. I think it's a great analogy because I remember the first time I had a Tesla a while back, and the first time you turn on the autopilot, you're like whoa, I don't trust it, right? Because you might drive a little more on the left in the lane versus the right in the lane, but it generally sits right in the middle of the lane and it follows the curves. But that first couple times when you turn it on, you're very nervous. At least I was like, all right, do I trust this thing? But as I learned the system and understood, the limitations and where it excelled, I got very comfortable with it. And yeah, it's a great feature. So I love that. I really like the analogy of the FSD with the AI-driven. Great connection there. Let me ask you a little bit about 2025. What do you think is the biggest thing that RedBlock has really come out there and accomplished this year?
I think 2025 started for us with a great bang in a way. So we presented our first ever industry paper. So we built our own visual benchmark. So if you peel the onions of AI behind the scenes, it's all driven by how performant it is. You ask the guardrail question, how performant it is. And if you've probably seen some of the OpenAI benchmark, it can now solve SAT. It could, clear the bar exam, and those are the benchmarks. When we started this, there were no benchmarks for visual reasoning because, RedBlock is all about visual reasoning. We look at the page and the AI decides how good or bad it is. So we presented our first ever industry paper for visual reasoning. I'm not going to go into details because it's going to take a whole sidetrack because based on two very popular game shows, but let's keep it for later. And that was early this year in Abu Dhabi. I was there, we presented. And then we launched the product. So we went GA on April 29th, I think the first day of RSA. We announced the product. We announced the product, not just the product available, we actually took an NVIDIA GPU cluster at our booth. The whole of AI running air gap locally and doing the things I'm just describing, JML and add user, aggregate user. And then we acquired the first set of early customers for us. I'm really thankful, short of disclosing the names, some of the largest in the world, working with us because they are very progressive in their minds. They have the problem that they have not been able to solve. And a small team that became slightly larger. We're now 14 people between Bay Area and Bangalore. So can't complain about anything right now.
So 2025 is the coming out party.
Yes.
What does 2026 look like?
The winning party. The goal is to get this in the hands of at least 20 brand new customers, many in conversations. We have not talked about the how publicly yet, and I'm short of almost stopping myself. Shall I say this? Shall I say this? Not. Because what we want to talk most is what is the problem they're solving. If you go to a website, the mention of AI is in the ratio of the mention of security is at least 2 or 5x. The AI is not there that much. We talk about the problem that we solve. I think next year the goal is to talk a little bit more about how we do this and disclose some of the papers that we have filed, some of the IP that we have created. So that's the plan for 2026. Acquire more customers, that's what I was saying.
So if there's one takeaway that people should take away from this conversation, what is the plea or call to action, other than visit the website, redblock.ai/IDAC, right? There'll be stuff there you can learn more, but what is something that's listening to this conversation, all right, so I've just heard about this thing called RedBlock. Now what?
If you have applications that are not connected, applications that do not have APIs, and Gartner is calling that category as disconnected apps. Talk to us, give us like a day and give us an app. We will get this up and running in our sandbox or yours, and then perform these actions, what you always wanted to do, but unfortunately you sent it to an IT ticket. AI will fulfill it in minutes instead of you're relying on somebody who's watching Netflix or on vacation and is going to come back and close the ticket. The AI will close it in like 3 minutes.
So Indus, we're here at the Gartner IAM Summit in Grapevine, Texas.
Amazing.
Yes, everybody's dreamed to come here someday. No, you presented yesterday. You've been at this conference now for a day and change. What's your impression of the conference, and tell us a little bit about your presentation yesterday.
So I think we're still at the, what's the right word? I think we're still skeptic about the use of AI in identity. We're still kind of walking tiptoe into this territory that, hey, can AI solve this problem or not? Luckily, there's lesser of a negative chatter on AI doing damage, which was kind of relieving for me when I was at the keynote yesterday. It was a little bit more balanced versus the other events I've been to. It was like, or the online chatter is how AI is going to do more damage, the Terminator. I think my takeaway is we're still a little bit more skeptic. But just like any other new technology, be it typewriter, be it the Gutenberg press, or be it the Tesla self-driving, as humanity, we got to experiment. We got to figure out whether this is going to work for us. Of course, there'll be bad actors, but we cannot stop innovating because of the bad actors in the world. So I think my impression is we have to be a little bit more aggressive about this. We have to be a little bit more forthcoming about experimenting, adopting of tools. I think that's my takeaway from like day and a half. Yesterday, I talked about, it was mostly how there's a gap in the market and how the attack surface is super exposed because there's more and more apps. The explosion of apps. You and I are old enough. I remember I had like 5 applications on my desktop. That was my world. Now the team that I have, they have 50 applications, SaaS and internal. So that app explosion is the driving force. And then agents coming in. So you no longer are your one person doing the thing, you have 10 delegates doing the thing. So how are you going to manage all of this?
Yeah, so what themes are you seeing or the conversations you're having here at the conference that make you optimistic for the future?
I think there is some conversation around non-human identity and how guardrails have to be put around agents that will access credentials. So I think people are thinking about it. People are also thinking about permissions. So if I allow an agent to do a task, is it static? Is it dynamic? How can I do just in time? So I think we're thinking around on the edges of what should be the art of possible, allowing AI to do the task, but with the guardrails and with the permissions around it. So I'm very hopeful that as innovators, as an industry in general, will solve this problem and will get through it. However, my only worry is that we have not fully solved the human identity problem. I hope we accelerate that.
What's not being emphasized enough? What are you concerned that we're not paying enough attention to?
I think the privileges or the issue of over-permissioning is still rampant. If I join a company, I need access to 25 systems. I clamor, I hue and cry and fight. I get 25 of those GitHub repositories. Just take that example. When I leave or when I change roles, I still have access to sensitive repositories and data. I think there's not enough attention being paid towards over-permissioning, privileges accumulating, static privileges. I think that requires rethought.
All right, final question. This is not a financial question. This is a question about, from the perspective of the technology. Are we in an AI bubble?
We are. I think this is a human mind. I don't want to be negative about it. It's a human mind, right? There'll always be a group of people, all of us combined, that'll be excited about something that is new because as a kid, you want to play with the toy. But then there are hundreds of kids wanting to play with the toy, so the toy manufacturers are out of control. And hence, there's a lot of money being pumped in on technology that's not proven. So, which is good and bad. Good that it brings out the best, bad that the best ones do not have access to capital to let the technology see the light of the day. So if you are connected with me, I am running a fund of $1 billion, I will let you try that for a $10 million check. But am I doing disservice? Probably yes. I should look out for other, I'm not saying anything against our relationship, but there could be better use of this money to invest in startups or technology to do a better good society. So it has to be more controlled, it has to be steadfast rather than, hey, let's just go invest all the money possible. We've seen that story in the web era. 96 to 99, everything that was promised went out of business. But everything that was promised ultimately was delivered over the next 10 years after the bubble. So all the web, all the SaaS, if you go back in time, oh yeah, shared drives, I remember startups that were raised hundreds of millions in shared drives went out of business. But what's popular now? Google Drive, Box, and Dropbox, born after the bubble.
Well, blast from the past, I'm thinking of my zip drives that I used to have.
Oh, yeah.
I can store 250 megabytes on it. Oh my gosh, there's so much room now, right? It's been a really interesting conversation. I definitely want to learn more about this. So again, go to the website, redblock.ai/IDAC. We were kind of getting to know each other before we hit record here, and we were talking about flying, like literally flying planes. So I want to know how you got into being a pilot, and what do you fly, and when are we going to go flying?
So every kid has the same dream, all of us, right? I want to be a guy riding the fire engine. I want to be a pilot riding a plane. And
Guilty. I wanted to be a pilot.
yeah, all of us have the same dream, but we get busy, life catches on, we get family, work catches on. And when I moved to the Bay Area, I grew up in India, of course. Air travel, now it's very popular. When I grew up, there was no air travel. And then when I moved to the Bay Area, I did not know. I started living next to an airport. So I live in East Bay in a small city called Dublin, which is like 1.5 miles from the Livermore Airport, which is a local municipal airport. It has 2 runways, fantastic. Both of them are good use. And one fine day, without telling my wife, I went on a discovery flight. And it was free. And then the flight ends very well, and I registered for a flying class and for an offline training class where they teach you the theory. So essentially, without telling my wife and my family, I started training for a pilot where I have to clear a written exam and an online in-air exam, or behind the wheels test as they were driving the car. And lo and behold, a few years later, I am now flying a single-engine Cessna. So I'm like, normal single-engine Cessna pilot, which can take 1 or 2 passengers, and then not go out beyond 300, 400 miles of my local airport. So it's fun. And you're most welcome to join me whenever you're in the East Bay, in the Bay Area.
How long did it take you to get your pilot license?
I did, I think, 66 or 68 hours over a period of a year.
Okay. So I've been flying flight simulators since I was in my teens.
You're halfway there.
Right. So I feel like, there's this, feeling that if you've played video games, a lot of people, there was a study is well, if the plane ever says, oh, we need a pilot, right? Anybody who's played video games, a flight game is yeah, I can fly a plane. I think it's so cool to have the time to be able to do that and the investment to be able to do that. What's next from a flight perspective? Do you go to a larger plane, or are you I'm good with the Cessna? And tell me about where the next part of the journey is.
Do you have more than an hour on this?
We could do it all the time. Yeah.
So the pilot journey is very similar to an identity professional journey. I'm just kidding. So the pilot journey is you basically, hey, I want to do a discovery flight. Then you become what is called a VFR pilot. So visual flying rules. Essentially, you visually look at stuff. Of course, you have a map, you have a guide. You look at objects. You cannot fly within or inside clouds. It has to be 100% clear day before you can fly. So the next step is you get IFR, which is instrument flying rules. You can not blindfold, but you don't probably look over the cockpit or the horizon. You can just look at the instruments and you can still fly, because now you're using guided instruments and automation and helping fly. The other part is you go from single engine to double engine. You go to jets, you go turboprops, you go, Boeings and the larger jets, which is thousands of hours of flying. Don't have patience, don't have time, not becoming a professional pilot yet, at least not on my bucket list. But I think VFR to IFR is a very simple journey. It requires another probably 50 to 100 hours of investment. You have to take another exam. You have to have another examiner in the plane clearing you. And of course, then you could fly anywhere. You could go above 10,000 because then visual flying is a rule and all that. So just follow that.
I think it would be so cool, Jim. Like, we do consulting during the day. We're like, why don't we just fly to the client, right? Rather than drive or take a commercial, it's like, hey, let's get a little plane and, take off and...
Nobody to bother you up in the air. You're just by yourself. If not your wife or your friends or your family, just aim for the sky, just going somewhere.
I think the visual and the instrument guided, that's a big leap, right? Because
It's a big leap.
From my understanding, most of the accidents are with the instruments, people not trusting them and kind of like saying, oh no, they feel like they're flying in a circle or something, so they go the other way, don't trust the instruments, and then end up in an accident.
Well, if you know the stats, most of the accidents are people trusting themselves too much. Most of the accidents are not on a bad weather day, but on a clear weather day. This is like a very jarring statistics from FAA. 56% of accidents are not in the air, but near the airport, whether you're landing or taking off and some obstruction. And majority of them, I don't have the numbers, are on a very fine day because I can see through it. Let me relax, soak it in. And next year, something goes wrong.
I always find it fascinating. I fly a lot out of the Atlanta airport a lot, very busy. And when you hear about like planes colliding, in the terminal and on the gates, and stuff, is like, these are giant planes. Like, how do you mess that up so badly?
I think it's the distraction. I think as individuals, we are more distracted. We're not paying attention. We have become like a goldfish brain, and accidents have happened more recently than earlier.
So can we get to full self-flying at some point? I know a lot of commercial flights are automated to some degree, even with like ILS systems for instrument landings and stuff like that. Not every airport has that, but we're coming to the point where an AI can essentially fly the plane for you as long as the instrumentation is correct, right, and the hardware is there. Like, how far away do you think we are from like pilotless planes?
I think pilotless planes are far away because especially on commercial side, if you look at, let's take A380, A350, Boeing's 777s and the modern planes, the Dreamliners, 90% of the flying is automated today because of the autopilot. It has a plan fed in and it just guides itself. Otherwise, unless there's an intervention, the landing and takeoffs are still very manual, very pilot intervened. Technology is there to automate it, but I think the rules and segregation and the last minute, the ATC intervening because there's a plane which is delayed in takeoff, etc. I think it takes time. I think it's okay. In my mind, you still want, at least if I am one of the 150 passengers in my Southwest, I want the pilot to be there, just like your Waymo or your Tesla. So Tesla still requires you to be sitting as a driver. In Waymo, I'm sure you've taken Waymos, the sheer fact that there's a steering wheel gives a sense of calm. Mm-hmm. And there was a discussion last week with someone, I forgot the name of the person, he said, oh man, if they could put a dummy there, it would give me even more sense of calmness because it make my mind feel that somebody's there, although the dummy is doing nothing.
Now I'm thinking of the movie Airplane with the dummy co-pilot inflatable that comes up. Indus, this has been such a fascinating conversation. I feel like there's so much more, again, so many hows of like how this works. We'll point people to the website. It'll be in our show notes and things like that for people to check out. Connect with you on LinkedIn, that kind of stuff. So really appreciate you taking the time with us, sponsoring an episode, getting the word out. This is the coming out party. Let's, cheers to a great 2026. And so we'll leave it there for this week. Thanks everybody for watching and or listening. You can find us on the web, idacpodcast.com. Like and subscribe, do all that fun stuff. And we'll leave it there. Thanks everyone. Take care.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.